Hey, Roberto.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for joining me to talk about technology and devices in the classroom.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
One of the things that I've encountered in the classroom, in my teaching in the biological sciences, is students spending a fair bit of time on their devices, the pocket texting or whatever. Have you encountered this?
Yes, I mean, I think it's part of the generation. Right now, students are so used to have tablets, computers, cell phones on the day-to-day that they cannot, seems to me that they cannot live without it, right? Yeah. Even during the classroom. Now, the question is what to do, right?
Right.
What to do. Have you found any?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a variety of approaches, right? Some instructors or profs will ban the devices outright. Some try and mitigate the impact these might be having on their teaching, and others wholeheartedly embrace the technology in the classroom, and they're willing to accept perhaps a little bit of, social media, inappropriate social media use, or texting, or those sorts of things in the classroom.
I don't know about you, but I don't feel that avoiding the technology is possible. I think banning is something that, well, yes, sure, students will not be allowed. As you said already, they will find out ways to use it even though they're banned. And you're fighting against this, right? And students may feel uncomfortable and not having the possibility of interacting, because it's part of the day-to-day life, right? It's like asking the professor, don't drink coffee during class. Oh my God, right? It's gonna be, so I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I will say that it's better to join them, to join them. Do you think that's...
Well, I actually use a fair bit of technology, so I use clickers. Now they've got the reef polling to allow the students to use their cell phones rather than purchasing an iClicker. And this is something I've been torn on, because asking students to have a cell phone, requiring them to have their cell phone and have that cell phone out on their desk as opposed to away in their bag makes the temptation to get on social media or to text, when they're trying to pay attention, that much greater. And so this is a concern I have, and I've personally noticed that some students spend a lot more time than others. Some students are good. You'll see, a small percentage of them, 10, 15, 20%, the cell phones or whatever the electronic device is, if it's not required at the time, it's away, it's in the bag. But for perhaps an equally large number of students, another 20%, they're on there every few minutes.
Yeah, one of the things that I try to do is that I try to incorporate the usage of this technology during my lecture, right? So what I have done is that I created a set of quizzes that I post every now and then I ask the students to actually go online and search for the information. I teach marketing, so I ask them, well, what about this company? Why don't you do some research? Spend 2 or 3 minutes going on your gadgets and find out about this company, and then I relate what they found out about this company or this product to what I was teaching, right? So I try to balance the amount of lecturing with the use of technology, right? Not precisely trying to say 50-50, no, but still let the students know that technology will be part of it. Now, will that resolve the issue of still using for other purposes? No. But at least I know that I'm gaining a little bit more than I'm losing, right?
Right. So there are some trade-offs.
Yeah, there are some trade-offs. But I don't know. I think, as you mentioned, right, there are some still students that they hide and they will not use it. But it was the same back before technology. Some students will raise their hand, some students will never participate, stay quiet and say nothing, right? One of the things that I have learned too is that there are ways in which you can actually get to know your students a little bit better when you use technology. Do you think that is possible?
Perhaps I'm not using the technology in the right way. I started a LinkedIn group for our graduating students to allow them to network with their peers, with previous years worth of graduating students. And one of the things that I would have them do is choose topics, career-related topics, in this case in the biological sciences, and post information on those topics, and then share their thoughts or comments on other students' topics. So in that sense, you get an idea of, or I was able to get an idea of what the student's career path was, and then if I could advise them, one way or the other, things to look for or be concerned about. So, yeah, I mean, to a small degree, I would say I have been able to get to know my students and their needs a bit better using technology.
Because if you don't have that technology, it will be impossible for you to know that information on this unless they will be willing to share it with you, right?
Office hours or whatever.
Yes.
You're not going to get that information.
I have a similar experience. I was teaching a blended learning class, and I used chat room, and I posted questions or mini cases, and I left them open for discussion, right? So students, this was mandatory, by the way, so students will type in answers, and they will reply students' answers, etc., etc. What I found out was not only that I was able to identify the understanding students had about a specific topic, but also I was able to pull, right, I'm not a psychologist, but I was able to pull certain personality styles, right? The student who always is negative, right? The student who always has to say no to everything, right? Or present the opposite perspective, right? And what is interesting though is that although it was not my primary intention, it helped me because when it was time for me to be face to face to these students, I knew how he was going to react. Right? I knew what kind of thing I have to say. I knew
you could anticipate the devil's advocate.
Exactly. He was going to be always on the negative side, right? Now, evidently, it takes a lot of time, and I think that is one important element that when you want to incorporate technology, you have to be aware of. It is free. It is easy to set up, but it requires some learning curve. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, the first time I used clickers. Wasn't necessarily the iClicker, but student response system, and there was a learning curve, and I wasn't willing to work it into the course syllabuses with a weighting of 5 or 10% because I wasn't sure whether or not it would be a success. So I was very apprehensive about using it. I wanted to use it. I thought it would probably be a good thing, but I was a little reserved. So I waded into those waters, and again, it was an optional thing. And when things are optional like that, many of the students, more than half the class, didn't want to purchase the clickers. The students that had them for other classes and whatnot, well, they were using them. And I think other students saw the benefits of having them in terms of being able to follow along with the lecture and chime in with what they thought, however a case study might unfold. That sort of thing.
I think you bring a very important point because I'm doing the same. I think you and me approach it in the same way. Whenever I'm going to try a new technology or technological tool in my class, what I will do is I make it optional. And the reason why I make it optional is because first, as you already know, you don't know how it's going to work out, right? Students may love it, may not love it, but even more importantly, the technology itself may not work.
Yeah.
Right? And then you are in dire straits because now what to do, right? So I try to take the approach of baby steps, right? So I'm going to try one technology, give it optional, see how it works, and at the end of the semester, evaluate students, ask students who use it, why.
What worked well.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then at the end, you can make the decision, geez, maybe it didn't work out as the way, maybe I can give it a try again optional and tweak it, or perhaps quit the idea and move on to the next one. Once, I think, I don't know if you agree with this, once you have found that one technique is good and is solid, as much as possible, now you can incorporate it in the syllabus, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my second time around teaching with iClickers, it was worth 5% of the mark. And then, then my next question was, is part of that mark a participation mark and part of the mark for correct response? And that takes you into an ethical area, right?
Yes.
Should marks be awarded for participation, yes or no? And this is something that, I've had other colleagues, struggle with it. Do you have a participation mark?
Yeah, I have, depending on the class, to be honest with you, in introductory classes, I do have participation. And the reason why I do that is because I use the technology for them to engage in participation. Because I have to be sure that they're getting the knowledge at the basic level. Once you get into higher level classes, the assumption is that they have gone through this learning and they have it, right? Moreover, I don't know if you've experienced, but they are more mature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Students in introductory classes, 1,000, 2,000 level classes, are just coming out of high school, right? So they are still not there yet. So I need to be sure that they have the understanding, right? And also, I found that technology helps you to break the barrier of the professor and student. Not that I don't want to have that respect between the two of them, but if the student wants to ask a question, the student is he doesn't want to be highlighted in spotlight, right? You didn't get that one, yeah. So now you have the technology of using, for example, Twitter, right, or the chat room.
They have the ability to ask the question anonymously.
Exactly, that's the benefit, right? And especially, as I said, at basic levels. And otherwise, they will never ask that question. They will leave the class with that black hole, right?
They don't know, and chances are there's a half a dozen other students sitting wondering the exact same thing in the classroom. When they ask the when one student asks the question, the others see the question, and they're all thinking, yeah, I was wondering that same thing.
Yes, and especially the example like Clickers or the Moodle. I use Moodle as well, and it has this similar tool of Clicker, right, that you can record answers live. So when you are clicking or when you're answering, the student who didn't answer correctly, he might go, oh, wait a second, now, okay, now I get it, right?
And some meaningful learning happens as a result of the assessment, yeah.
Exactly. Now, I want to get back to the point of the tools, because there are so many out there. Like nowadays, you just Google teaching tools, teaching software. There are
an endless list.
How do you decide? Did you have any way of choosing? How do you go about that?
I thought the best resource, I found that the best resource has been some of my colleagues. It was my colleagues when I was teaching at UPEI that were using student response system. And I inquired, and they said, oh, it's really easy to use. That was the first thing I needed to hear. It doesn't take too many hours to figure this out. And I thought, okay, well, and if they were willing to mentor me, so how would I go about setting this up? And I was very fortunate to have some colleagues that were willing to give me 15, 20 minutes and help me nail down the basics so that I could instantly have some success with it.
That's a good point. I think you can rely always on your peers, even if they're not in the same faculty. You can always ask, because the technology can be used across different disciplines.
So I can come over to marketing and use
it. Exactly, and you can see what I do. Other thing that I consider on top of that, I myself consider the topic that I'm going to teach and the number of students that I have in the classroom. Because when you have classrooms with 250 versus, I'm going to go extreme, 20 students, it's completely different, right?
I agree.
Have you had experience using technology with big classrooms?
Yeah, so with large classrooms, I mean, I've had a class of up to 255 kids. And it's just a sea of faces, and it's hard to really connect with many of them. And if you ask a question, an open, a question to the group, you get the same sort of dozen students out of the 255 that will answer. The rest of them just kind of stay silent. And so I thought a great way of engaging, when I found myself in that situation, I immediately turned to clickers. And you can get everybody engaged, even those sitting way at the back. You throw up the clicker question, even if they weren't focusing and paying attention, as soon as they see the clicker screen, it kind of draws them back into the discussion. And I thought it was a really good way of maintaining interest.
And in the big classes, I haven't thought classes that big, but I have used technology on classes of 60 to 70 students, right? And I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, not everything that I have used as work, right? And that's the other thing I think is important to to be aware of. You should not be afraid of failing, right? Not everything that you're going to try is going to work, and that's okay. I think it's better to try than not to try. I'm going to give you an example. I try to use Twitter, and I try to use Twitter in a way of getting feedback, instant feedback during the classroom. So the way I'd work, I said, okay, I have a Twitter account. I'm going to leave it open. So I have my computer and I have my tablet with my Twitter account open. So I was tracking, as I was going through my lecture, I was tracking if there was any questions. The reason why I did that is because in large group, I found that students tend to be a little bit more insecure about asking questions, right? When it's smaller, I think it's easier. But whenever 60, 70 students, I thought, well, I'm going to give them a voice. I'm going to put the Twitter here, and they don't.
And so they can see it on the screen.
No, they don't going to see it on the screen. I'm just going to see it and say, hey, student X is asking this, or perhaps not even mention the name. Hey, I got a question about this. Okay, this is what I mean by that. But see, the question has been posted anonymously, and now the student is not in the spotlight. That was my idea. I thought, oh, that's going to be
seems like a great idea.
Yeah, but as it turns out, it didn't work out. I was not getting any questions. And I thought, well, what's the problem? Well, one of the problems is that I found out that not many students have Twitter accounts, and they didn't want to create Twitter accounts. So
this is a few years ago.
Yeah, it was a few years ago. So I said, well, I tried it. It didn't work. It seemed like a good idea. Let's move on, right? And perhaps I should have surveyed how many of you have Twitter accounts. How many will you be willing? I don't know, but that's okay. I think
you figured it was free. The majority would engage, right?
Yeah, but do you agree that you should try? Then, if it works,
I don't think, if it's not going to be too time consuming, setting up a Twitter account, I don't think is going to be time consuming. As somebody, instructor, professor, give it a shot, right? What have you got to lose? A couple of hours of time. If it works, as I think you would envisioned it, it becomes a very, very powerful teaching tool. And I think, we all have the responsibility to, consider and weigh the use of the inclusion of different types of technology. I wouldn't say that I've explored technology nearly as much as you have, but I've also been fortunate. I've not had any of the technology that I've tried actually not succeed. All of the stuff I've tried is pretty well established. I'm not a pioneer by any means in that regard. But one of the things that you'd mentioned that I'd like to go back to that I thought was really interesting is the maturity level of students with respect to technology. One of the things I've found is that students that are going to spend their time texting or on social media rather than focusing on the lecture, I find that seems to be a greater problem with the kids right out of high school. So I don't know, this is just kind of my take on it, but they seem to lack that maturity. The fourth year students, it seems to be less of a problem. They seem to understand the connection between their time on social media and their grade.
Yes.
They seem to have learned that lesson along the way, or perhaps the entire group didn't come through with a smartphone in their hand, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with those first year students, I really see it being they lack that impulse control.
Yeah.
They think about the phone, or the phone vibrates and they immediately grab it and disconnect from the lecture.
Yeah. I think,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges nowadays for an instructor is attention span, because students are coming with a very short attention span in which get a text here, then switch to Facebook, then switch to Instagram in a matter of seconds, right? Yep. So and then they chat one-on-one with friends, right? And
then they try and pay attention to the lecture.
Exactly, and they pay attention to the lecture. But they're used to what I know, based on just my experience, what I found was that if I can provide chunks of lectures, and then have lecture, use the technology, lecture, case, for example, lecture and a video, end of the session. So what I'm trying to do is chunking, right? Chunking the information I've given. I could lecture for 75 minutes straight.
Right.
keep your cell phones away, or I can chunk it in a way that they are, like they do, texting. Okay, now I'm going to Instagram. Now I'm going to talk to you.
Match the learning mode.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the reason why I'm using technology.
It's interesting, as you were describing that, the kind of the chunk, and then the insertion of, or the inclusion of some technology, and then another chunk. One of the things that so I was doing some reading on this, and I was trying to get a better understanding about what I can do and how I can help my students and better meet their learning needs. And one of the things that I was reading about was technology breaks. And so some people are starting to include an actual, here, have 2 minutes of time. So they give a chunk and they actually just give 2 minutes of time, not necessarily searching something up. But here, access your phone now, and I'm going to disengage and I'll stop spooling out the material to you. But in a sense, you're kind of doing both. So you're getting them you're giving them an opportunity to get on their devices and maybe do something very urgent that is distracting them anyway. But at the same time, do something, that's class related.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, that's what I thought. I thought because they're used to live their lives like that, right? They are constantly switching back and forth with applications and real life conversations, right? And so I said, well, what if I do that? Now, is it foolproof? No, it's not foolproof. There are always going to be students that no matter what you do, they're not going to pay attention, right? But I think it's working. And you know what? I feel more comfortable now with my teaching. Because as instructor, there is nothing more frustrating to see sleeping faces, like people not paying attention, as you said, texting here.
What's the point?
Because you have been lectured for 75 minutes. So if that's the case, I can break them, so to speak. Here's the lecture, stop, watch this video. And then, okay, the student who was falling asleep, they go back. Then, okay, lecture. Now, go on Facebook and look this company. Oh, okay, will they be using that for other purposes? Well, sure. Right?
But as long as they come back with the information that they need, no harm done, and they haven't lost any information in the interim. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think technology is so friendly nowadays that even if you don't consider yourself like a tech savvy, you should not be afraid. You should give it a try. Don't worry, give it a try. If it doesn't work out, well, there you go. You learn the lesson and then move on to the next one. Right? I'm pretty sure there is something out there that you can use that will help to enhance your teaching.
I found one of the things that helps. I mean, I don't incorporate those type of technology breaks in my teaching, but one thing I've found help keep students on task is to engage them. I take my regular, rather than deliver a straight didactic lecture where you get a lot of students, they disengage. As you say, the attention span is very, very short today. You've got 3 to 5 minutes, and the minute the student thinks that they know what you're talking about, boom, they're disengaged. And particularly, I think there's an element of addiction for some students.
For sure.
Some students not so much, but others, and I've also found a direct correlation with the grades and those that do more of this, right? But I found that if I flip, or at least partially flip my classroom, where we have those discussion moments, so I create what's called the think, pair, share. Do you use them?
Yeah, I've seen that.
So, we'll be having a discussion about something, genetically modified organisms or whatever, and I'll, set the stage with a question for the students, and I'll say, okay, now turn to the person beside you and discuss it. Well, they can't be on their electronic device and having that discussion with the student. And so I found that kind of really breaks it up and it forces them to engage. If they know there's a question coming, they have to pay attention in order to be able to kind of answer that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to how to use the technology as your ally.
Because we're not going to get rid of it.
No. That's a reality. Students are born with this gadgets, and perhaps it's going to get even worse in terms of the technology available. In 10, 15 years, something new, right? So the idea is you need to progress, that's for sure.
Very interesting. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.